We have come to the end of an era for Crash Bandicoot. We've reviewed the OG Crash trilogy created and developed by Naughty Dog. But there is one more Crash game developed by them that was essentially made to kill off Crash Bandicoot. But did they really manage to kill off the franchise? Or did they manage to inadvertently make a beloved kart racer that caps off their time with Crash Bandicoot in a great way? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Welcome, retro gamers, to Take It or Leave It. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped is one of my favorite games of all time. From its gorgeous PS1 visuals, to the great boss encounters, to the level design, and the fun as fuck time trials, it was quite the moment for the orange marsupial. Along with Crash 2 also being an absolute gem, Naughty Dog has been nothing but consistent on the PS1, and after covering the original trilogy, we are here. The final Naughty Dog game in the Crash series. Crash Team Racing, aka CTR. After wrapping up the trilogy, Naughty Dog was on top of the world, but they did not want to make Crash 4 since they pretty much did everything they can possibly do for the marsupial in 3. Universal Interactive obviously felt otherwise, and due to either by choice of Naughty Dog or Universal, their partnership was brought to an end. Around that time is when the staff at ND were playing kart racers like Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing, so Crash Team Racing was released on October 10th, 1999.
Interesting thing though is that Crash Team Racing has been in development for longer than you might think. Considering that these games were made yearly, you'd assume that CTR began development around the time that Crash 3 did, but that's not the case.
Believe it or not, this game has been in development since Crash Bandicoot 2 was finished. Which means that while the majority of the team focused on Crash 3, a couple were working on CTR, and by the time the trilogy concluded, it was already too much of a realized project for it to be scrapped. As I said in the intro though, Naughty Dog wanted this to be the final Crash game ever, but it wasn't. So they tried to at least end off the game that they wanted to kill the franchise off with some kind of grace.
Little did Naughty Dog know, however, that this game will go down in history to be considered one of, if not, the best kart racer that isn't Mario. So let's jump into our kart and drive into Crash Team Racing.
Start your engines for a Sony Computer Entertainment America production. Fasten your seatbelts for another Naughty Dog creation.
The story begins with a normal day when suddenly an alien comes out of nowhere to do some racing. This alien is named Nitrous Oxide and considers himself to be the fastest racer in the galaxy. He challenges the best racers on Earth to compete with him in a game he calls Survival of the Fastest. If his opponent wins, he will leave Earth alone. If he wins, he turns the world into a giant concrete parking lot and makes the inhabitants into his slaves.
As you do as an alien, I suppose.
And of course the racers that Oxide is challenging just so happen to be Crashing Crew. Makes sense to me.
Get ready to race for the fate of your planet!
This story is fucking stupid, but I like how dumb this story is. because I personally don't believe that the devs really expect you to take it seriously.
Oxide's motive is completely and utterly ridiculous. I mean, he wants to turn the planet Earth into a giant parking lot. Not only does that sound plain fucking stupid, but Oxide, buddy, if you do that, then how will you or your slaves even survive with no food or water? If you change it into a parking lot, then what's gonna happen to the sources? Are you just gonna bring your own food and water? How are you exactly gonna make this work when the world is literally nothing but cement? You're not exactly playing creative mode in Minecraft building Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for the billionth time. Like I said though, I don't believe that the story is to be taken seriously. There is an actual compliment that I can give the story though. To give it credit, the game does constantly remind you of what Oxide intends on doing to the Earth by having the boss fights keep bringing up the info to you all the time in their own cutscenes. But apart from that, yeah, not really much else to say. Let's actually start taking a look at the game itself. I would personally make the argument that the most important part about a kart racer is how it controls. Level design matters too, but if there is no fun way to play said levels, then you wouldn't exactly want to experience them, which is why I'm happy to say that CTR has fantastic kart controls. As a matter of fact, I'd say that it controls better than Diddy Kong Racing and especially Mario Kart 64. Like, way better.
You heard me right. Naughty Dog managed to craft better kart racing controls than Mario Kart 64. Dare I say, it controls way better than all of the Mario Karts.
First off, the karts just have such a satisfying amount of weight to them. It feels like you're driving through and jumping off ramps in a go-kart. It feels heavy while still being fast. But then we've got the real reason why this game controls so well as it does. Power sliding. Oh my god, power sliding. By holding either L1 or R1, you do a little hop and then start drifting. Then while you're drifting, this gauge meter at the bottom right corner starts to fill up. Once this meter turns red, you are expected to hit the other shoulder button and give yourself a boost, and you can do that 3 times in a single drift. This is incredibly satisfying to pull off, and you can give yourself an insane amount of speed, and even take advantage of the system even more by using another boost gauge to use a boost method that fans of this game call Ultimate Sacred Fire, and it's as awesome as it sounds. There is even a little trick that I use to make certain turns where I drift on a boost ramp before I leave the ground to be able to power slide in midair. I wonder how many people know about this. Speaking of ramps, if you jump off one, you get a boost while you land. I see you typing in the comments, "This is not impressive, Mario Kart did it too, idiot." Well, this game did it before Mario did.
Not so creative after all.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
But this ain't a kart racer without no items to use, and Crash Team Racing has got them items. The types of items to use in this game are fairly similar to the ones in Mario Kart, just crashified. For instance, they changed the green shell into bombs, the red shell into missiles, banana peels into potions, Superstar into Aku Aku / Uka Uka masks, and so forth. The overall balancing with this game's items is pretty decent. Definitely better than Mario Kart Wii. Even then though, it's still not perfect. You could be near last place and just get a boost, and be in second place and get a fucking mask, but either or, it's functional. The items are pretty fun to use, although the weird thing is that there are some items that I swear the computer players cannot access whatsoever. This game is equivalent to the blue shell, it's this warp thing, and I have played this game dozens of times, and I can tell you that through all those replays, I have never once been attacked by one. Same thing with this clock item too. I could be wrong of course, but I've never found myself attacked by these things by the racers. In multiplayer, yes, but not single player.
So far though, this game has proven itself to be very fun to play just by the kart controls. Now sure, the rest of the gameplay does matter, but the controls I would say are an extremely important aspect about kart racers. So already, this game has perfected the most important part about a kart racer. Anyway, gameplay time.
Explaining gameplay with CTR will be more complicated. That's because this is the very first game I'm covering on the channel to not be just a single player experience. This game has different modes, see? So for this video, I will be talking about 3 of them. The adventure mode, the arcade mode, and the time trials. The only ones that I can't talk about are versus mode and battle mode, and that's because... Well, who the fuck am I gonna be able to get to play this with me? I live in the middle of nowhere, for God's sake.
But I have experienced 2 players in this game via versus mode. From what I have experienced, it's fun. The only thing to note is that you need an L-shaped accessory in order to play 4-player. But yeah, that's about it.
We'll start with the adventure mode, since I guarantee that this is the mode that most people experience with this game.
You can travel around this area and practice your driving skills.
You okay, Aku Aku?
The adventure mode is this. The game allows you to pick between 8 characters. Every single one of these guys have different stats to suit your needs. I chose Crash for my adventure mode playthrough because I'm fucking basic. You start in this hub world called the Adventure Arena. You will be using this place to get into all of the races and all of the challenges. For the first 2 worlds, Aku Aku / Uka Uka, depending on whether you picked a good guy or bad guy, will give you hints and tips, and it's a little annoying. Now sure, these can be useful for newcomers, but I've played this game hundreds of times at this point, so yeah. Luckily, you can skip them, but I wish that there was an option to turn them off. Let's talk about the tasks to do in the adventure mode. First, we have the trophies. These are the bare minimum you need in order to at least get the normal ending, aside from the keys, which will be talked about in the bosses segment. Now let's get into the actual racing of the game. After all, this is called Crash Team Racing. To describe the racing with one word would be chaos.
Yes, this is not an original way to describe the racing in this game, but it's not only the best, but in some ways is the only word to describe it with.
When you're in the middle of it, racers are constantly using items against each other, trying to overtake one another at any chance, and the overall sound design makes it feel even more crazy. Sure, what the racers do isn't new, but it feels the most intense here, and I love it. This is chaos in the best way possible. That, along with the brilliant controls, would justify a purchase of this game alone. The racing in this game is so fun. The next thing to talk about with the adventure mode are the CTR tokens. Basically, collect C, T, and R, letters scattered around the track for you to collect, and get first place. This will reward you with a CTR token. I enjoy these ones quite a lot since it encourages you to try and explore the track a bit and can even potentially help you discover shortcuts. Then we've got a third and final challenge for the normal racetracks. The relics. The time trial relics from Crash Bandicoot 3, Warped, make a triumphant return. The way that they work is that there's a certain number of time crates in the track for you to break. But this time, if you break all of them, it rewards you with removing 10 seconds off of your time. 10 fucking seconds. Trust me, for Crash Bandicoot time trial standards, this is a godsend, and there can be times where the deduction is necessary, which I think is great design. It forces the player to stay sharp while trying to go fast. It also tests the hell out of your drifting too. There are plenty of times where a trio of these crates would be on a turn, and you can either be cautious and turn carefully, or be a total badass and drift while trying to aim accurately. Seriously, fewer things are more satisfying than hitting a time crate while drifting around a tight corner. The relic races are easily my favorite part in this game. I love them so much, and I managed to get a platinum with most of the races, which feels good to do.
So hey, let us naturally jump from my favorite part of the game to 2 of my least favorite parts of the game. That makes sense to me.
You see, there are these other CTR tokens to get outside of the tracks. The crystal grabbing arenas. You are thrown in one of the battle arenas and are set with the task of collecting 20 crystals in a strict time limit. Now, when I first played these games, these parts were the fucking worst. Playing them now, it's not so bad, but that's because I retried them so many times in the past that I know the spots of the majority of the crystals. But again, these parts aren't so bad. I kind of warmed up to them over the years. Because now it's time to talk about my actual least favorite part of the game. That being the gems. These are just cups. You do 4 races each to win the gem, meaning that you have to race through the same tracks you already raced through. The first 4 are just normal race cups, and the 5th and final one is racing all of the boss characters except Oxide in the boss levels, and it's so fucking boring. Not only because you are racing through the tracks you just completed, but it also equals more replays for the boss tracks in particular. Think about it, you need to first play them for a normal race, then replay them a second time for a boss race, then replay them a third time for the CTR token, then replay them again for a fourth time for the time trial relic, assuming that you get it on the first try, then go again for a fifth time for the cup, then you finally play through them a sixth time for the final gem. If that doesn't sound a little bit annoying, I don't know what will. What they probably could have done was just have one gem and have that be the cup where you just race the boss characters. Sure, that would mean that you'd have to play the boss races 5 times, but 5 is less than 6, and that would be good enough. They could have had that one gem be a normal white clear one, or they could have combined the different gem colors to form a new rainbow one or something. I don't know, that idea of them doing that just sounds cool to me.
And that is it for Adventure Mode. Kinda. So let's move on to the other 2 less content-filled, yet still pretty fun modes.
How about we talk about the other time trials? I know what you're thinking. I thought you've just talked about the time trials. Well, technically no. Those were the relic races. The real time trials are where you drive through every single individual track as fast as possible. The reason I did them was to unlock the character that you can get by doing them, that being Dr. Entropy. This is the very first time I have ever unlocked him in the original game. I've completed the adventure mode tons of times, and I've played the arcade mode a lot, but though I've tried it out, I've never ever done all of the time trials and unlocked Entropy until now. It was challenging but fun, and getting Entropy was a decent reward. The only thing that I'm leaving out is that when you beat Entropy's times, you unlock Nitrous Oxide's times. I didn't end up trying them for this review, mainly because I ended up doing all of the time trials in one single recording, so by the time I was done, I was quite tired. For what I know though, they are the same thing as the Entropy ones, just way harder. At one point, there was a rumor that if you do the Oxide times, you actually unlock the ability to play him, but it turned out to be false. The only way you can play as Oxide in this game is via cheat code. The devs did want to put Oxide as an unlockable character in this game, but they weren't able to due to hardware limitations. Quite a shame too, since his cart looks really cool. There is also this other cut character from the game that you can also play as via cheat code, that being Penta Penguin, who has the greatest lines in gaming history.
Penguin Ye 2? Penguin Ye 1?
Apparently in the PAL version, his stats are all maxed out. Too bad that ain't the case for the NTSC version. Let's complete our gameplay segment of the video with the arcade mode. Now, as to say, it's just a solid ass arcade mode. In fact, I used to spend a lot of time on CTR's arcade mode. I'd pop in the game quite often just to do some simple racing. We of course have Mario Kart styled cups with different difficulties and the ability to race the individual tracks, which is a feature that Mario Kart rarely has. I mean it, the only Mario Kart game that does this is Super Circuit. Every single other Mario Kart does not allow you to just do single races. Am I the only person who finds the lack of this feature incredibly embarrassing, especially in Mario Kart 8? I mean, sure, you can select what tracks you can play via versus mode, but that's not good enough. All in all, Crash Team Racing's gameplay is fantastic. Sure, the cups in the adventure mode feel like padding and the crystal challenges are whatever, but the adventure mode itself is incredibly well designed. The arcade mode is simple fun, and the time trials are challenging. I sometimes forget just how content-packed this game is. It's so good.
Here's the thing though, I've been spending a bunch of this time praising the controls and racing without even talking about the tracks themselves. I say that it's time that we finally do that right now.
And the tracks are great.
Is anyone really this surprised though? This is Naughty Dog we're talking about.
I cannot name a single track in this game that is bad. Sure, there are only 18 of them, but it's still easy to find a couple of duds, even in the best games. I mean, the worst track in the game, that being Turbo Track in my opinion, I would just say is okay. But before I gush over the track design any further, it's also important for us to appreciate the awesome hub world in the adventure mode. Every area feels very naturally connected. I mean, you can naturally transition from the center of the hub world to the snowy world. You know when a game is special when driving around a hub world is fun. It can really be a great way to practice with power sliding and jump boosting, or whatever you call it. I mean, there are parts in the hub world that are clearly designed for that purpose, as well as the hub world just giving the adventure mode more character. Now we will move on to the tracks. Oh boy, some of these tracks are just fantastic. Where do I even begin? The tracks are so good that if they weren't as good, the game would suffer. This proves just how fucking important level design is. Almost every track has something interesting going on. Every track has their own shortcuts that take effort to try and master. Even the most basic tracks of the game have something going on for them in that department. So, in order to make this easier for me, I will just list down my top 5 favorite tracks in the game, in no specific ranking order except for the last one. Number 5 is Cortex Castle. This track has a lot going on. It is one of the first tracks to truly challenge you, with some real tight turns and a pretty tricky shortcut. Number 4 is Papu's Pyramid. This one too has tight turns and an even harder shortcut to master, depending on the character. But when you do it, it is fun to nail every single time. Number 3 goes to Sewer Speedway. This is one of my favorites because of its phenomenal shortcut that is so fun to master. But I also like the way it's designed. The pipe physics did cause a learning curve for Naughty Dog, and they did manage to program it fairly well. However, you are also able to go really fast in this one, and it's super fun. Number 2 is given to Tiger Temple. There was a time where this was my favorite track in the game, and even when it isn't anymore, it's still great, and it's just an oval. The bumps are exhilarating, the fire tikis are a good hazard to look out for, and the shortcut is awesome, with you needing to directly interact with it in order for it to open. And number 1, my favorite track in the game, Engine Labs. For its great presentation, that single tunnel that makes you go really fast, and this awesome exploit that you can do by jumping on this ramp and giving yourself a crazy amount of speed. The layout itself is also just pure racing perfection. I could talk about every track in the game. Really, I can. But we'd be here all day. Best that we move on.
Time for the boss fights, and I have a pretty good feeling about this one, considering that Crash 3's boss fights were all awesome. Huh? CTR's boss fights are mediocre? Oh, for fuck's sake, Naughty Dog, are you fucking kidding me?
The quality of Crash boss fights went from hit and miss to good to just okay. That's the thing. These fights are not bad, they're fine. But that is the thing. At least with Crash 1 and 2's boss fights, even when they were at their absolute worst, there was something to say. I'm not even gonna bother breaking down these bosses individually because they are all literally the exact same. Your opponent has an infinite item, they are about as fast as you are, and that's really all that I can say. Especially when you do overtake them, you can break the race in half so easily by constantly throwing items behind you and taking advantage of the shortcuts, if the track has them. The only other thing I could say is that it kinda gets gradually harder, but the only boss fights that can slightly challenge you are the last 2, and even then it's not that hard. Hell, you could completely cheat the final boss fight with Oxide just by taking the ridiculous shortcut. So the race can go something like this. And yes, I have beaten this fight normally, and it's still not that hard. I can confirm that Crash Team Racing has the weakest collection of boss fights in the classic era. Now sure, individually speaking, they're not the worst, but they are just so fucking boring that this is the second worst part of the game for me. Again, they aren't bad, but they aren't good either. What about the presentation of the game? Crash Team Racing is a very impressive looking game. Now sure, the character models are extremely jagged, but for how much is going on with the environment, it just makes you think, how the fuck is this game not lagging like shit? The amount of detail that these tracks have is just admirable. I'd even go as far to say that this is the best looking 5th gen kart racer out there. Every track is distinct from one another, every track has detail, and every track is oozing with personality, and unfortunately, that's all that I can say. For such an impressive looking game for the hardware, it kinda just speaks for itself. The presentation is just that good. And the same thing goes for the soundtrack. There's not much else I can say about this game's music other than the fact that it's another good OST from Joshua Mansell. It matches the genre really well and feels like you really are in a crazy race. What I will say is that this is probably my least favorite soundtrack of Mansell's work on this franchise. I just don't really find it as memorable as the music in the trilogy. But it's still good music, so...
Ending time! This game might just have the best completion ending in the series. Why? You'll see.
So if you beat this game to 100 or even 101% and face Oxide again, you are treated with this ending.
You beat me once again! Now I have to go back to the planet Gazmoxia a complete loser! I must be getting slow in my old age. That's it! I'm finished racing in these mushy backward worlds! Keep your miserable planet! I'm out of here for good!
I know, doesn't seem like much, but there's more.
During the credit sequence, boxes of text pop up on the bottom of each character that appears on screen and tells you what they've been up to. Basically, a very cute throwback to the 100% reward in 1, just better. They give you way more to read and way more characters to read about, and some of the things that they've been up to are pretty funny to read about. Like how Polar became an ice cream taste tester, or what Cortex calls the new element in the periodic table that he discovered.
But that's not what makes the completion ending special. This is what makes the completion ending special.
You are shown a slideshow of concept art from every Crash game from 1 all the way to Team Racing. The fact that this is here is already cool enough, but what makes this special is that it shows just how much Naughty Dog really cared about what they made. You can feel them evolving with each and every installment, so looking back on how far they've come is legitimately quite heartwarming. After we look at the concept art, we look at how different Crash was in Japan, and then we get to the final portion of the slideshow that is easily my favorite part of it. The part where they go over the people who are responsible for these games. From game designers to artists to music composers and the founders themselves. These are the people who are responsible for the games that I've been praising. These people created one of the greatest platforming franchises ever made, and now they have just created one of the best kart racers ever made. Guys, I fucking love Crash Team Racing so much. It has more than stood the test of time and more than earns its reputation for being titled best kart racer that isn't Mario.
But to that I say, it's not only better than Mario Kart 64, it's better than all of the Mario Karts, honestly. This is my favorite kart racer of all time, and it is so goddamn good.
Sure, there are a few things that bug me about the game, obviously. The story is dumb, the crystal challenges are a little annoying, the gem cups are a slog, and the boss fights make me feel empty inside. But do you really think that that's enough to lower the game's quality for me? Hell no! The controls, the well-crafted adventure mode, the characters that you can play as with unique stats, the respectable amount of additional content. That's why this game is a masterpiece. Yeah, I said it, what up? All I can say is, well done, Naughty Dog. Considering that you will most likely never make a Crash game ever again, that's okay, because you've ended off your time with the series with a bang. On the scale of quality, I shall give Crash Team Racing a 9 out of 10. Take it.
That concludes all of the Naughty Dog Crash games. I will definitely review the rest of the Crash games one day, but here's the thing. This will be the last Crash game I will ever review for this year, and possibly for even next year. That's because I want to take a proper break from Crash Bandicoot and review other franchises. And I imagine that quite a few of my subscribers are waiting for a Resident Evil 2 video. A Resident Evil 2 video is happening next year. Maybe. This was Max Drive, you just watched. See you on the other side.